Welcome to Legends of History, where the lives of kings, conquerors, and forgotten rulers are brought vividly to life. Here, Jarl sets sail on epic journeys across stormy oceans, walk the halls of ancient power, and witness destinies shaped amidst the clash of swords and ambitions. If immersive tales of the past captivate your imagination, please like and subscribe to support more legendary stories just like this one. In tonight's story, we journey into the age of Vikings and kings, where a young prince named Cnut rises from the shadowy coasts to shape his empire with courage and cunning. You'll discover the fractured kingdoms of Denmark, England, and Norway, and witness how Cnut forged a legacy across them all, a tale swirling with ambition, conquest, and the relentless force of the North Sea. Chapter 1. Shadows over the North Sea. In the days when wind and spray tore across the northern waters, Scandinavia and England stood apart, yet bound by the turmoil of Viking ambition. Here, amidst crackling thunder and the roar of ancient tides, rulers contested power over fractured realms, and destiny whispered from the shifting gloom. Into this world was born Cnut, a prince destined to chase far-reaching shadows. On storm-lashed shores, young Cnut grew, watching longboats cut the ocean's wild surface like runes carved in foam. His homeland, Denmark, was fierce and proud, but never at peace. Raids shaped the lives of its sons, and tales of conquest echoed in every hall. In these windswept moments, Cnut's imagination fired with dreams of distant lands, and perhaps dreams of a crown shining above the churning sea. His childhood was one of restless learning. Between lessons in swordplay and counsel, Cnut listened closely to each story told by battle-scarred jarls, stories of his father, Sweyn Forkbeard, a king both feared and ambitious. Sweyn's rule rested on the edge of a blade, balanced between Denmark and the lure of distant England, a land both coveted and perilous in equal measure. Beyond Denmark's rolling hills lay the kingdoms of England and Norway, each fractured by their own struggles. England's fields flourished beneath uncertain kings, as Viking raids relentlessly battered its shores. Meanwhile, Norway's fierce valleys echoed with the clash of rival clans, all hungry for power. Across the North Sea stretched a patchwork of ambition, waiting for a leader bold enough to unite them. Cnut watched his father plot and raid, learning that a king's will must be as shifting and strong as the ocean itself. Sweyn Forkbeard's forces set sail under grey clouds, seeking glory in foreign kingdoms. The young prince learned early that power must be seized with both cunning and courage, and that the fate of a crown is etched in the outcome of each thunderous crossing. The news of battles spread quickly across cold, narrow seas. Cnut listened as messengers brought word of English kings in turmoil, their thrones pressed by Norse invaders, their people wary yet resolute. In Denmark's candlelit halls, plots thickened with each storm. Cnut's world became a tapestry of whispered plans, forged alliances, and the distant hope of one day ruling united lands beneath the same sky. Night after night, the fireside buzzed with talk of raids, truces, and betrayals. Cnut's kin spoke of enemies and allies, shifting loyalties, and the weight of ruling restless tribes. The prince began to sense the true burden of his legacy, the mingling of blood and ambition necessary not just to survive, but to reign. Each tale stoked his determination and shaped the prince he would become. Sweyn Forkbeard's ambitions stretched beyond Denmark's borders. He saw England as more than a prize it was, a land of ancient kingship, ripe for transformation by Viking hands. But conquest brought peril. English defences hardened, and rival chieftains eyed the throne with envy. As storms battered the coast, Cnut absorbed the lesson that victory depended not just on strength, but on the tides of fortune. For Cnut, destiny was more than a distant tale, it shimmered on every cresting wave. He saw himself not merely as a prince, but as a future king moulded by the sea's restlessness. The North Sea's vastness became a symbol of possibility and peril, a domain he might one day master, if only he possessed the wisdom to ride its storms and harness its terrible beauty for his cause. From his earliest days, Cnut understood that the throne demanded both ferocity and diplomacy. His mentors taught him the old way shonor in battle and the value of oaths. Yet they also whispered of deceit and strategy, reminding him that a single misstep could bring ruin upon even the most powerful ruler. These lessons seeped into Cnut's heart, forging armour not only of steel, but of resolve. As autumn storms lashed the coasts, Cnut's thoughts turned to Englander land glimmering across the sea. To Danish eyes, its kingdoms were weakened by rivals and internal strife. Whispers of opportunity swirled through darkened halls. The prince grew restless, his heart pounding with anticipation, sensing that his fate would be claimed not within Denmark's borders, but far beyond them, on shores yet unknown. Sweyn Forkbeard, ever the strategist, nurtured Cnut's ambitions. Around flickering torches he recounted the saga of the Viking age, the glory of sea kings and their bold ventures. These fireside stories fed Cnut's imagination and spirit. Each tale became a stepping stone toward leadership, revealing the tides of loyalty and betrayal that ruled over kingdoms as surely as the relentless winds ruled the north. The world Cnut inherited was far from united. Kings and jarls jostled for power, their alliances as fleeting as summer mists. Denmark's realm shifted with every campaign launched and every treaty forged. Cnut's childhood unfolded between feasts and battle preparations, an existence always on the edge of unrest, shaped by the press of history and the dreams of greatness whispered beneath the howling storm outside. The crossing from boyhood to command was quickened by hard decisions and harsher realities. Cnut saw firsthand how rulers carried the scars of both triumph and defeat. Villages scarred by fresh raids, warriors gathered beneath weathered banners, and long-lost relatives reappearing with claims all served as reminders that a king's burden could never be laid down, not even in sleep or sanctuary. Yet, even as war loomed on every horizon, there were moments of kinship and learning for young Cnut. Seated beside experienced warriors, he listened to stories of ancient gods, lost kingdoms, and fates entwined across the seas. These tales kindled in him not only ambition, but empathy, a recognition that every life swept up in conquest had a story deserving to be heard and honoured. The tides that shaped Cnut's youth were unpredictable. Sometimes victory came as a sudden storm, at other times patience was the only answer. With each passing year, Cnut became not just a prince of Denmark, but a weaving of many traditions, part Viking raider, part diplomatic peacemaker. It was a legacy fraught with contradiction, and yet one that would make him unique among kings. Through bitter winters and wind-torn springs, Cnut grew into a formidable presence at court. He learned to read the moods of warriors, anticipate the desires of rival chieftains, and weigh the strength of every alliance. Denmark's destiny became his own, and as he watched the restless waves by moonlight, he understood that his time to seize fate was drawing near, heralded by storms over the North Sea. Evenings brought quiet moments, filled with ancient songs and the low murmur of ambition. The elders recounted destinies shaped by both fortune and foresight, reminding Cnut that a ruler needed more than bravado, needed patience and vision. With each tale, Cnut's mind sharpened. He saw that to command the loyalty of men and the fate of nations, timing and wisdom must guide his every move. In the shadows cast by firelight, plots simmered. Would Denmark rise or fall? Would its prince become conqueror, or be swept away by tides stronger than any one king? The future clung to uncertainty, just as ships cling to hope in the eye of a tempest. For Cnut, every whispered secret and careful promise became part of the weight he carried as the North Sea's shadows stretched toward a new dawn. So begins the saga of Cnut the Great, a prince destined to leave an indelible mark on the North Sea's kingdoms. With legacy as his anchor and ambition as his sail, Cnut's journey would wind through storm and silence alike, guided by the lessons of his youth and the fierce resolve that only a world of fractured thrones could foster. The waves themselves seemed to conspire in his fate. Before Cnut could lay claim to distant crowns, he would have to navigate the treacherous currents of family loyalty and political intrigue. Denmark's future and the balance of power across Europe rested on the choices he had yet to make. But as the night deepened and the wind howled outside, one thing was clear: a new force was rising from Scandinavia, ready to shape the destiny of nations. The first light of dawn crept across the grey waters, illuminating a world brimming with potential and peril. The stage was set for Cnut's journey, a journey that would see him tested by war, guided by cunning, and transformed by the unyielding tides of history. As Scandinavia and England awaited the coming storm, a boy grew into a prince, and from the shadows over the North Sea, a legend was about to rise. Chapter 2: Fire and Steel. the invasion of England. The North Sea churned with dragon-prowed longships as Cnut set sail, bringing with him a host of hardened Viking warriors. Across the grey waters, a new chapter of English history was about to be written in fire and blood. As the prow of his ship split the waves, Cnut beheld distant shores he intended to claim, driven by ambition and ancient vengeance. Beneath storm-dark skies, Cnut's warriors gathered on the ship decks, their armour gleaming like cold moonlight. The air was tense, thick with ancient songs and the promise of violence. Every rower's stroke brought the fleet closer to England's coast, where fate awaited. Thunder rolled, echoing in the hearts of those who would fight for glory and gold. The invasion had begun, and nothing would halt its relentless approach. Torches flickered along the horizon as Vikings landed, iron boots crunching on pebbled beaches. The first villages fell into chaos, homes set aflame, the night sky painted with orange and crimson. Shouts of terror mingled with battle cries. The sound of steel clashing with shield filled the air. For the Anglo-Saxon defenders it was a living nightmare, as centuries-old kingdoms trembled under wave after wave of Danish assault. The countryside wept with smoke. Cnut's forces swept across fields and forests, relentless as a March frost. Every hamlet became a battlefield, every road a line of retreat or defiance. Anglo-Saxon warriors gathered what arms they could, their courage tested against a foe both fierce and unyielding. Behind each clash the land itself seemed to groan beneath the weight of conquest and loss. Harvests burned in the fields as Cnut's campaigns scorched the earth. Fields meant for grain now bore only ash and trampled dreams. Cnut's lieutenants pressed ever onward, urging warriors to show no mercy. Yet, among the flames, families huddled together praying for deliverance or a miracle. Throughout the chaos, the throne of England became the ultimate prize, its fate teetering in the hands of strangers. Across rain-soaked woods, the echoes of war reverberated. Danish axes hacked through wooden barricades, while desperate villagers fought back with whatever tools they could grasp. Sometimes hope flickered out a narrow escape or a hidden glen. But the violence never ceased for long, as Cnut's resolve seemed as inexorable as the tides themselves, and every sunrise meant new horrors and new legends in the making. Knotted banners snapped in the wind, their runic symbols catching the eye of friend and foe alike. Cnut's commanders bellowed orders, herding their warriors through choking smoke toward the next confrontation. Even as Anglo-Saxons gathered in makeshift shields' walls, determination hardened upon their faces. They swore to fight for every village and vale, knowing each stand could be their last, but fighting on regardless. News of the Viking invasion spread like wildfire. Messengers rode across England's battered heart, warning towns and abbeys yet untouched. Bells rang out in lonely churches, calling defenders to arms. Local lords rallied what forces they could, pledging loyalty or rebellion with every breath. In smoky halls, desperate councils plotted defence or desperate surrender, the spectre of Cnut haunting their every decision and whispered hope. On moonlit nights the rivers ran red as skirmishers flared beside fords and bridges. The clash of oak-shafted spears and Norse steel became a dreadful hymn, echoing through the misty dawn. Some battles were won through cunning, ambushes concocted by local warriors who knew their land. But more often it was the Vikings who pressed forward, their reputation for ferocity growing with every burnt village and crimson-stained stream. Sinister shadows danced behind Cnut as he marched onward, his mind ever fixed upon the English crown. Each morning new reports arrived, towns taken, castles besieged, resistances crushed. Yet Cnut remained relentless, the dream of kingship burning like a star within him. To his followers his courage was unmatched. To his foes he was the embodiment of fate's cruel hand, reshaping England in the image of a Viking warlord. Days blurred with smoke and thunder as Cnut's army advanced. War horses thundered through muddy lanes while hungry crows circled the corpses left in their wake. In the chaos, allegiances shifted lord might one day resist, and the next submit, desperate to spare his people or salvage pride. But no matter the deals struck, Cnut's gaze never wavered from the jewel of his ambition, the English throne. Far from the battlefront, England's rulers struggled to mount a defence. Hasty alliances were forged, old feuds forgotten in the face of the Viking storm. Some saw Cnut not only as a threat, but as a chance to settle their own scores. Across smoky rooms, whispers of betrayal mingled with prayers for deliverance. Politics became as dangerous as any battlefield, with treachery lurking behind every promise and handshake. Loot and slaughter accompanied the Viking hosts. Yet within their ranks discipline was fierce. Cnut's warriors acted with brutal coordination, their raids not merely chaos, but tactics forged in cold deliberation. Peasants fled into the forests, children clutching mothers' skirts, as the sound of horn and war cry shattered quiet dawns. The price of conquest grew heavier with every mile of blackened earth left behind. The invaders brought more than swords. They brought fear itself. For many, the sight of a longship sail was the end of hope. Yet within that darkness, tales of bravery grew. Some villagers managed to stand firm, archers posting themselves atop church towers to rain death upon approaching Danes. These small victories, while fleeting, inspired resistance, keeping alive a glimmer of the old England amidst the tide of fire and steel. Among the flames and ruins, survivors bore scars both visible and hidden. The young were pressed into labour or captured for ransom, while elders mourned vanished friends and shattered homes. The road to conquest was littered with stories of loss, of survival, and occasionally of unlikely kindnesses between enemies. As Cnut advanced, the human cost of his ambition became a living ledger, etched in tears and memory forever. Battles raged from the Humber to the Thames, each encounter stamping the land with blood and legend. Saxon Thames, armoured in battered mail, fought tenaciously, sometimes repelling the Danes for a night, a week, or a single desperate sunset. Yet Cnut adapted quickly, his fleet channeling fresh warriors to wherever the resistance stiffened. Through sheer determination, his invasion pressed deeper, reshaping the destiny of England step by flaming step by flaming step. In the aftermath of each battle, Cnut's men gathered to mourn or revel, depending on the outcome. Fires were lit, wounds bound, and sagas recited beneath starlit skies. For many Vikings this land was alien and hostile, yet Cnut kindled a unity among them, promising plunder and a place in history. Over every campsite the ambition of their king pulsed like a drumbeat, carrying them towards the next conflict. Stories spread of the relentless Dane, how he could not be tricked or turned aside. In broken halls, defeated nobles whispered of Cnut's strategy show he struck where least expected, how he spared some villages to sow confusion. To friend and foe alike it seemed the sea itself had come ashore, a tidal wave of Viking power sweeping all before it with cold, inexorable purpose. The invasion forged both heroes and villains. Some Saxons rose to mythic stature, their feats echoing in fireside lore. Women and children pulled wounded men from burning homes, risking all to save those they loved. Each act of resistance carved a new line in the saga of England, even as Cnut's name became synonymous with fate and fear, a shadow looming over every crossroad and crumbling wall. Cnut's victories came at a cost. Disease swept the camps, and some warriors longed for home. Yet Cnut's resolve did not waver. He rallied his men with promises land, wealth, and the glory reserved for those who changed the world. As the English winter deepened, even the winds seemed to howl with the names of the fallen. Still, Cnut pressed on, his dream growing ever more tangible with each conquest. By torchlight, negotiations sometimes flickered in the shadows. Fearful town elders would offer tribute, hoping to buy mercy for their people. Occasionally, Cnut accepted, weighing gold against the need for fresh supplies or a strategic pause. Yet more often than not, the sword spoke clearest. The peace of England, like its crown, would not be bartered. It would be battered into existence, shaped under the hammer blows of war. With every mile claimed, Cnut's legend grew. He was both destroyer and builder, feared and admired in equal measure. Anglo-Saxon chroniclers wrote bitterly of burned manors and lost kin, yet even they could not deny the strength of the Viking king's will. In firelit halls bards sang of the storms that brought Cnut to their shores, and of the destiny he carved with fire, steel, and unwavering ambition. As winter's grip tightened, the land fell into uneasy silence. The fighting slowed, but the peril did not pass. Both invader and defender awaited the next move, the turning of fate's wheel. For Cnut, every hardship endured became a stepping stone toward kingship. For the people of England, each dawn brought hope and dread in equal measure, wondering whether peace or further ruin would arrive with the morning light. Thus the invasion raged on, a crucible for all who lived through it. Cnut's army and the defenders of England were forever changed by their dance of blade and fire. Out of the ashes of conquest, a new order would soon rise. But for now the land echoed with the saga of fire and steel, the memory of Cnut's invasion rising, undimmed, in every trembling heart and every story yet to be told. Chapter 3. The Crown Amidst Chaos. The death of Sweyn Forkbeard, King of Denmark and recent conqueror of England, plunged conqueror and his followers into a maelstrom of uncertainty. Rival claimants rose across the embattled land, each grasping for the crown. Betrayals lurked in every shadow as allegiances broke and shifted overnight. For Cnut the struggle had only just begun, and only the strongest would survive amid the swirling chaos. In the wake of Sweyn Forkbeard's demise, the fragile unity of his conquest shattered. Nobles who once bent the knee now questioned their loyalty. Enemies gathered strength, hoping to seize the moment and drive the Danes from England. Cnut stood in the heart of this storm, surrounded by uncertainty, determined to carve his own destiny from the discord that threatened to consume him. Across the kingdom, whispers of rebellion echoed through halls and hovels alike. Edmund Ironside, son of Thelred the Unready, emerged as a defiant rival, burning with resolve to reclaim his father's throne. Meanwhile, Cnut raced to rally his own scattered Forsishe's warriors, as battered as his ambitions, yet unbowed by adversity. In this perilous arena, every decision could mean the difference between victory and oblivion. While his enemies conspired in secret, Cnut moved with swift resolve. He crossed the North Sea anew, returning to England's shores with fresh reinforcements. Battles raged in forests and fields, rivers ran red, and the land trembled beneath the boots of Viking warriors and Anglo-Saxon defenders alike. With brutal decisiveness, Cnut sought to forge order from chaos, no matter the cost in blood or trust. Alliances, once unbreakable, now shifted like sand. Ambitious lords weighed their chances, some playing both sides in hopes of favour or survival. In smoky camps beneath stormy skies, Cnut's lieutenants debated the best course, wary of betrayal at every turn. Cnut's leadership was tested not merely by strength, but by his wits and his willingness to wield both steel and subtlety in equal measure. Cnut understood that force alone could not win him a kingdom. His cunning shone in secret negotiations. He promised gold, land, or forgiveness in exchange for loyalty. Some nobles hesitated, fearful of reprisal either way, but many found the Viking prince's resolve and his vision of unity difficult to resist. Through whispers and bargains, Cnut began to stitch the torn realm together, one oath at a time. As autumn fell, the clash for England's crown intensified. Edmund Ironside and Cnut met again and again upon blood-soaked meadows and shattered villages, their fates entwined by destiny and the sword. Each battle bore new scars. Each truce was temporary, a brief glimpse of peace before the storm resumed its fury. Yet in every encounter, Cnut's reputation grew, both as a warrior and a statesman. Through cunning, Cnut outmaneuvered rivals who underestimated his resolve. He punished betrayal with swift, brutal reprisals, yet rewarded loyalty with unexpected generosity. Enemies who surrendered sometimes found themselves honoured rather than destroyed. As harsh as Viking justice was, Cnut's calculated mercy drew supporters from unlikely quarters. The young Viking's complexity became his greatest weapon in the fight for England's throne. Old animosities fueled the violence swirling across the realm, Saxon against Dane, friend against former friend. In these desperate days, Cnut's court became a tapestry of intrigue, with spies and envoys flitting among rival camps. Messages travelled in secret, sealed with wax and wary trust. With every new alliance or broken oath, the sands beneath the crown shifted, ever threatening to swallow up the unwary. Skirmishes gave way to pitched battles. Each clash was a test not only of arms, but of Cnut's ability to inspire and hold together a fractious force. His warriors, Danes, Norsemen, and even disgruntled Saxons looked to him for guidance. In midnight councils, Cnut laid out strategies both daring and pragmatic. The uncertainty of war pressed down on all, but his unyielding will was a beacon amid the darkness. The bastard sons of conquest plotted their own ascents. Within the halls of power, nobles whispered promises and threats in equal measure, searching for advantage. Cnut, ever vigilant, countered plots with clever diplomacy and ruthless efficiency. When words failed, steel spoke. The shadow of betrayal loomed always near, but the Viking prince refused to be outmaneuvered even by the most cunning of rivals. Gradually, Cnut's vision began to take shape. His willingness to spare former enemies surprised. Many he offered peace to those who pledged loyalty, binding them not with iron, but with honour and necessity. Each new ally brought him closer to the throne. Yet these alliances were fragile, easily shattered by lingering mistrust. Cnut's greatest challenge was not his enemies, but the uncertain faith of his new friends. As winter's grip tightened on the land, Cnut pressed his campaign with relentless determination. Supplies dwindled, weary soldiers yearned for respite, and the common folk prayed for peace. The land itself seemed to reel from the violence and upheaval. Yet through hardship and doubt, Cnut's presence inspired hope and fear, his legend growing with every trial faced and every obstacle he overcame. A final confrontation loomed. Edmund Ironside and Cnut stood poised for one last fateful clash. The embattled realm held its breath as armies mustered anew, banners snapping in icy winds. Some future would be forged on the field of battle, decided by sword and shield. Cnut steeled himself to meet destiny, knowing that a single day's outcome might determine the fate of all England. Amid mounting tension, envoys passed between the two rivals, carrying words laden with threat or hope. Negotiations sputtered, threatened by distrust and the memory of past betrayals. Still, both Cnut and Edmund recognized the futility of endless bloodshed. A council was called to seek common ground, though few believed words could truly end the fierce ambition that drove both men ever forward. At last, the decisive battle erupted, merciless and thunderous, as Viking and Anglo-Saxon clashed beneath a frost-veiled sun. The fighting was fierce, brother against brother, heroism and tragedy mingling with the cries of the wounded. As the hours dragged on, Cnut's tactics, ruthless yet brilliant, tilted the balance. The land groaned beneath the storm of iron as destinies collided upon the field. In the aftermath, with the ground littered by the fallen, both men stood weary but unbroken. Neither side claimed a true victory, for both had lost dearly. It was then, with blood still fresh upon their hands, that Cnut and Edmund faced each other, not as mortal foes, but as men shaped by war's relentless trial. In that moment, the seeds of a historic agreement were sown. Through weary negotiation, a solemn pact was forged. The kingdom would be divided, with Edmund retaining Wessex and Cnut ruling the lands north of the Thames. Both kings swore oaths to honour the hard-won truce. For a fleeting moment the realm rested. Yet fate's hand remained restless, and the sands of power were already shifting once more, eager to test the resolve of kings and the faith of their people. Not long after the uneasy peace, Edmund Ironside met an untimely and mysterious end. Whispers of assassination and treachery rippled across the land. Whether by fate or foul deed, the crown of all England now stood unclaimed. Cnut moved swiftly, his enemies scattered, his supporters emboldened. Finally, the young Viking's ambitions approached their culmination, the long-sought throne almost within his grasp. Seizing the moment, Cnut claimed the English crown. In a solemn ceremony, bruised yet victorious, he received the sceptre and wore the circlet of power before the watching eyes of lords both Saxon and Dane. The Viking conqueror, once an outsider, feared and reviled, was now hailed as king. In that instant, England's fate shifted with the rise of a ruler both formidable and unexpected. As king, Cnut immediately faced daunting challenges not only of conquest, but of governance. He had inherited a land ravaged by years of war and unrest. To secure his rule, Cnut reached across divides, seeking counsel from both his Viking lieutenants and trusted English nobles. His court became a symbol of unlikely reconciliation, blending Norse customs with ancient Saxon tradition to forge a new path forward. Cnut's authority was stamped in new laws and visible acts of power. He punished rebellion harshly, but rewarded loyalty generously. Across storm-swept moors and bustling towns, his name became synonymous with order and resolve. Merchants, farmers, and warriors alike felt the weight of his stern yet steady hand. For England, the age of ceaseless chaos faded, replaced by the rule of a Viking king determined to leave his mark. In the courts of Europe, the tale of Cnut's ascent rippled outward. Foreign monarchs marvelled at the Viking now enthroned amid ancient Saxon halls, ruler of lands that had seemed forever divided. Cnut's reign brought not only conquest, but a new kind of unitone forged in war, but tempered by vision. The sands of power, ever shifting, settled for a time beneath the feet of this unexpected king. So ended the chaos and uncertainty, as England lay at last beneath the sure rule of Cnut the Great. The saga of his rise from exiled prince to cunning commander to sovereign by sword and treaty became legend. The Viking who claimed a crown forged his own destiny and set the course for an empire that would shape the very heart of medieval Europe. But for now, England's crown gleamed amid the calm after the storm. Chapter 4. Uniting Two Worlds. In the heart of England, a powerful struggle unfolds. King Cnut, ruler of Viking blood, wears the crown of a land shaped by ancient laws and Christian faith. He stands at the crossroads of two great cultures, each with demands that threaten to pull his kingdom apart. This is the tale of a king weaving the threads of conquest and tradition into a new tapestry of unity. With every step, Cnut faces Viking chieftains who hunger for plunder, eager for the old ways of glory through strength and sword. Yet the land he rules also holds the quiet hope of the Anglo-Saxon people, who seek peace, order and justice under the law. Cnut must prove himself not only as a fearsome warrior but as a visionary king, able to bridge the gulf between rival worlds. In the council halls of his new kingdom, Cnut listens closely to advisors from both sides. He knows the weight of Viking oaths and the sacred customs of the Anglo-Saxon court. The king understands that to hold his fragile realm together, he cannot favour one camp over the other. Instead, he adapts and blends traditions, forging something stronger than either culture alone could offer. Cnut introduces new law codes carefully crafted to mix the rough justice of his ancestors with the orderly statutes of English kings. These laws are read aloud in great halls, their words echoing across stone and timber. Subjects see that the king values fairness and stability, reassuring those who feared an age of endless conquest. Through wise rulership, Cnut wins their loyalty slowly, almost imperceptibly. At the heart of Cnut's rule lies a shrewd understanding of the Church. He knows that in England, faith binds communities together as tightly as any family tie. Rather than oppose the Christian clergy, Cnut becomes their patron. He donates gold to build monasteries, grants land to bishops, and kneels in prayer at sacred shrines. This reverence is both genuine and profoundly strategic, forging a powerful alliance. But consolidation of power is never simple. Old loyalties linger. Cnut's court is a tapestry of tension. Danish jarls stand proud beside wary English nobles, each watching for signs of betrayal. The threat of rebellion always lurks at the edge of peace. Through patience, negotiation, and at times sheer force, Cnut persuades, coaxes and commands respect, determined that his hard-won crown will not fracture along lines of old rivalries. To truly unite his kingdom, Cnut relies on marriage as a tool of diplomacy. He weds Emma of Normandy, the widow of the conquered English king. This union is more than personality as a political masterstroke. Emma brings legitimacy among the Anglo-Saxons while her continental ties strengthen Cnut's influence beyond the North Sea. Together they form a royal alliance that echoes across Europe's courts. In public ceremonies, Cnut takes special care to show respect for the rituals of both Viking and Anglo-Saxon heritage. He dons elaborate garments woven from cultures old and new, and appears at burnished altars and in bustling marketplaces. These gesturesmal but deeply meaningful remind his people that their king belongs to all of them, regardless of ancestry. It is unity both seen and felt in the rhythms of daily life. Through grants of land and titles, Cnut rewards those who serve him faithfully, weaving a new nobility that is neither strictly Danish nor wholly English. Warrior loyalists find themselves side by side with ancient English lords, each beholden to the king's favour. This blended aristocracy, though uneasy at first, is central to Cnut's vision of a stable and lasting empire where rivals become partners. Cnut's approach extends beyond courts and councils, reaching into every corner of his realm. He commissions repairs for churches damaged in war, supports the rebuilding of villages, and decrees protection for traders on busy roads. Actions that might seem practical also serve to heal wounds of invasion, showing subjects that peace under Cnut means prosperity for all. Gradually, trust begins to take root where suspicion once grew. Even as he presses for unity, Cnut does not erase the fierce spirit of his Viking followers. He calls forth warriors for expeditions, sharing treasures and stories of glorious ancestors. Yet these adventures are now carefully chosen, meant to strengthen the crown rather than sow chaos. It is a delicate balance honouring the restless heart of the north, while anchoring his reign in the enduring soil of England. King Cnut's genius lies in his ability to sense the mood of the people and adapt. Sometimes he offers lavish feasts in the old style, with song and mead. At other times he sits thoughtfully with priests discussing matters of law and mercy. From the great halls to humble villages, word spreads of a king who understands both the call for freedom and the longing for order leader shaped by two worlds. Stories spread of Cnut's visits to holy sites, where he walks barefoot and humbly among his subjects. These journeys are both pilgrimages and performances, reinforcing the idea that the king is not distant or proud, but bound by the same beliefs and hopes as his people. It is in these sacred places that the layers of cultural difference soften, replaced by shared reverence and awe. Yet not all are pleased by Cnut's methods. In smoky longhouses and quiet crofts, whispers of resentment simmer. Some Vikings grumble that the king has grown soft, forsaking the old gods and freedoms. Among strict churchmen, suspicions persist about Cnut's true faith and the violence of his early days. The king's experiment in unity is tested constantly, from all sides, by doubt and memory. Despite resistance, Cnut's reforms ignite transformation across his lands. Law and faith become pillars on which the kingdom rests, each reinforcing the king's authority. Criminals and brigands find less shelter in the shadows as local sheriffs and reeves enforce Cnut's justice. For the first time in years, villagers feel safer travelling to market or gathering in church signs that the storm of conquest is quieting. In forging his empire, Cnut keeps his eyes on the coasts and rivers that once brought ships of war. He turns those waterways into arteries of trade, linking England to Denmark and Norway through bustling ports. Merchants carry not only wares but stories and news, connecting people who once faced each other over raised shields. It is commerce, more than sword, that now drives prosperity and peace under Cnut's watchful gaze. Behind closed doors, Cnut's advisers debate how far to push change. Some urge swift reform, others warn of backlash. The king listens, weighs the risks, and acts with measured patience. He knows that true unity cannot be forced overnight. Instead, like a patient weaver, he ties each thread carefully, ensuring that no strand Viking or Saxon will unravel the whole work of his reign. Among the English, Cnut issues charters affirming the freedoms of towns and the rights of the church. These gestures echo the promises of their old kings, yet now bear the seal of a Viking conqueror. English scribes record deeds and proclamations in Latin, while Danish warriors bring tales of the north to firesides. Day by day, small habits shift, and a hybrid culture takes root, shaped by two powerful legacies. Cnut's marriage to Emma is also a story of personal ambition and compromise. Emma herself wields influence over the court, drawing on wisdom from years spent as a queen. Their union is sometimes strained by old allegiances and political manoeuvring, but together they present a united front. Their children, born of both Viking and Norman blood, symbolize the hope for a future where division gives way to shared destiny. When threats stir abroad, Cnut calls upon both Saxon and Norse warriors, forging an army of mixed heritage. Side by side, these men learn to trust one another not only as subjects, but as comrades bound by the king's vision. Training in the shadow of fortress walls or beneath cathedral spires, these armies become a living emblem of Cnut's ambition, a realm that stands strong because it draws from many sources. Cnut's rule also shapes the world beyond his own borders. Kings and princes from distant lands take notice of the stability he brings. Ambassadors journey to his court, offering gifts and seeking alliances. His blend of strength and diplomacy earns respect where once there was only fear, and the fruits of his leadership begin to echo beyond the reach of his own ships and soldiers. Legends grow around Cnut during his reign, some true and some embellished in the telling. Songs are sung in longhouses about battles and gold, monks pen chronicles praising his wisdom and piety. In the flicker of firelight, subjects young and old debate what kind of king he truly is: a conqueror, a lawgiver, or something altogether new, a unifier who makes the land sing with a single voice. As years pass, the bitter memories of war slowly fade beneath the steady rule of King Cnut. Children grow up marvelling at stories of the Dane who became their guardian. Markets thrive, harvests grow, and people gather at festivals celebrating both Viking sagas and Christian saints. Through fear, patience, and vision, Cnut guards the fragile peace he has forged from the chaos of conquest. In the twilight of his reign, Cnut stands as a figure uniting worlds once at war. No longer only a Viking or just a Christian king, he is remembered as a ruler who transformed the very idea of kingship. Through swift sword, steady law, and generous spirit, Cnut the Great weaves a legacy that endures, reminding all who rule after him that true strength is found not in division, but in unity. Chapter 5. Empire of the North Sea. In the hush of dawn, sails unfurl across dark, restless waters. Cnut, king not only of England, gazes from his deck as mist hides the horizon. His ambitions stretch farther than any Viking before him, toward Denmark and Norway. With every wave his ships slice, power gathers, and the fate of kingdoms shifts. This is a chapter of grandeur, ambition, and peril upon the tides. Across the North Sea, Cnut's envoys move with gifts and threats alike. Some lands are wooed with coin, others subdued with iron. Word spreads of the new power ruthless when crossed, generous to the loyal. Cnut's empire grows not only by conquest but with careful bargains and oaths sworn under moonlit skies. Yet as boundaries widen, so too does the distance between his throne and the hearts of his subjects. From the bustling harbours of York to the frosted fjords of Norway, messengers carry Cnut's commands. His rule is stitched together by the speed of swift longships and the clink of minted coins. Local chieftains kneel, wary but compelled. They send tribute and hostages, a fragile pledge of faith. The empire feels immense, yet every throne is a seat balanced on the edge of uncertainty. Loyalty is shadowed by fear, and ambition never sleeps. Cnut's court becomes a tapestry of tongues and customs. Here, Norse jarls trade wary glances with English earls. The king holds feasts draped in silver and song, blending Odin's sagas with Christian psalms. Council fires blaze into the night while distant storms batter his coasts. Behind the revelry, Cnut weighs each adviser's word, knowing one slip could shatter this delicate alliance of cultures and clashing pasts. Winter descends hard on the north. Frost cripples villages and hunger looms. In Denmark, rivals whisper behind heavy doors, questioning if Cnut's rule can withstand the biting cold and old rivalries. Yet the king's emissaries arrive, bearing salt, grain, and warmth, silencing unrest. He proves himself not only a warrior, but a shepherd in grim times. Each gesture secures loyalty for another season, yet worry never leaves Cnut's mind. The fleets are Cnut's lifeblood. Sleek dragon-proud ships command the waves, linking his empire. Every keel that cuts water is a promise of power and a reminder of what might be lost if the winds change. Traders, soldiers, and merchants cross from city to city, knitting the realms closer with goods and news. But the sea, as ever, can both unite and divide, and storms brew beyond even the king's reach. Coins stamped with Cnut's stern image circulate through his dominions. They jingle in the markets of London and echo in the halls of Jelling. With each transaction, his authority is proclaimed anew. The currency becomes a bond stronger than swords, binding farmer and thane alike to the empire's fate. Money buys bread, buys loyalty, and buys time to root Cnut's legacy deeper if only fortune continues to favour his reign. Through quiet valleys and crowded ports, Cnut's laws are proclaimed. Written in Latin and runes, they seek to make peace where steel once ruled. Justice marches in disciplined array, taming ancient feuds. Some praise the king's fairness, others bristle beneath new burdens. Still, the rule declared from far-off Winchester or Roskilde must survive the test of distant winters and unquiet chieftains. Empire, after all, is as fleeting as mist over the waves. Behind palace walls, the North Sea's empire hums with intrigue. Agents drift through smoke-lit halls, carrying secrets and warnings. Cnut listens, sorting truth from rumour, friend from traitor. His strength is as much in knowing when to forgive as when to strike. Such vigilance wears on the mind, for every victory sows the seeds of tomorrow's peril. The grandeur of the empire is built not only on conquest, but on ceaseless watchfulness. Even as Cnut claims new lands, whispers of rebellion never truly fade. In Norway's wild hills and Denmark's hidden thickets, old loyalties simmer beneath the surface. Lords who kneel today may plot by candlelight. To rule from the heart of so many worlds, Cnut must be both storm and harbour. The tension fuses with the salt air, forging a legacy that is magnificent and ever at risk of unravelling. Cnut's marriage to Emma binds England more tightly to his throne. With this union, Saxon and Dane are intertwined in royal halls. A queen of keen mind, Emma lends counsel and legitimacy, sharing burdens and dreams. Yet royal families are always double-edged, with jealousy and rival claims lurking just beyond the candle glow. Cnut's family becomes another thread holding the empire together, or threatening to pull it apart. Feasts in the empire glitter with gold and laughter, yet strain flickers at the edges. Nobles jostle for position near Cnut, while outcasts gather restless in the shadows. Song and story fill the halls, but every cup raised to the king is a reminder of debts owed and battles yet to come. Power, like the sea, never stands still. It ebbs, flows, and sometimes roars back with a vengeance. The sea is both moat and highway. Ships glide beneath starlit sky, bearing Cnut's soldiers to distant shores, or returning laden with tribute and tales. The waves whisper of distant storms, and the seagulls' cries mingle with the shouts of warriors unloading their spoils. Every crossing tests the empire's tether, and each journey is a roll of fate's dice. The North Sea gives and takes, all in a heartbeat. Diplomacy becomes Cnut's quietest weapon. He offers silk and silver where steel once glinted. Treaties are signed over shared cups, and former enemies sometimes become cautious friends. Yet even the finest words are fragile, broken on the anvil of ambition or old wounds. Alliances shift with the tides, forcing Cnut to adapt, charm, and when needed remind his partners of the empire's steel backbone. Cnut's fame swells throughout Europe. Kings from distant lands send envoys with gifts and oaths of friendship. They seek favour or fear his power. Yet with each new pact, the empire grows more tangled. Foreign ambitions and rivalries whisper at court. The king must stand not just as conqueror, but as a beacon of order in a world that always threatens to slip from his grasp. In the starlit hush before dawn, Cnut sometimes walks alone by the water's edge. His thoughts drift across the realms he rules, the burdens and glories tied to his crown. The voices of ancestors mingle with the crash of waves, reminding him that seas unite and divide. In these quiet moments, he feels both conqueror and caretaker, shaping an empire destined to be sung about long after his own voice fades. Fresh rebellions flare like brushfires. A Norwegian chieftain refuses tribute, or a Danish lord schemes in secret. Cnut dispatches fleets with chilling efficiency, yet answers sometimes require more than swords. He offers pardons or builds alliances by marriage. Each crisis warded off is a reminder, managing an empire is a balance of might and mercy. One false step, and the tides might carry it all away. The clergy flock to Cnut's court, seeking his favour and shaping his image. Monks pen chronicles of his deeds, blending faith with legend. Cathedrals rise, funded by the king's coffers, while pagan rites linger in hidden valleys. Through careful patronage, Cnut solidifies his authority and sows the seeds of legends that will one day outlive his empire. In the tapestry of rulership, saints and warriors are threads of equal strength. Saints and warriors are threads of a Cnut's court. Great councils convene in timbered halls where the laws of the land old and new are read aloud. The king demands respect, but listens as complaints and vows ripple through the crowd. Justice is dispensed as spectacle, sometimes harsh, sometimes wise. The empire is not only built on conquest, but on laws knotted with compromise and the hope for lasting order. For Cnut knows unity will not be won by conquest alone. In far corners of his empire old traditions smoulder. Norse sagas are sung in candle-lit halls, while Saxon prayers rise in stone churches. Cnut's challenge is to honour both past and promise, weaving together rivals and kin. The memory of fire and sword lingers in every negotiation. The grandeur of his empire shines, but its foundation is ever and always a patchwork of forgiveness, fear, and hard-won trust. News of Cnut's deeds travels beyond the north. Poets speak his name in foreign courts, his reach stirs envy and awe. Some dream of alliances, while old enemies bide their time. Cnut must govern not by force alone, but by reputation, his legend becoming as mighty as any army. To preserve the empire he must shape how he is seen as much as what he commands with sword and ship. The crowning achievement, unification across raging seas, proves as dangerous as it is dazzling. What Cnut rules today might slit free tomorrow. He cannot be everywhere, and each vassal is a tale of temptation away from rebellion. The king's power is real, but so too are the doubts swirling in distant halls. Empire, after all, is a word carved in shifting sand, always perilously close to the surging tide. Yet even as Cnut's hold is tested, he draws strength from his lineage and vision. Memories of battles fought and promises made steel his purpose. He gathers his children close, instills in them a legacy meant to last. Across the empire loyalists rally, hopeful his vision will outlast passing storms. The grandeur of the North Sea Empire gleams brightest when shadowed by adversity, as all great legends do. So, in the fading light of another day, Cnut's ships drift in the twilight mist. His empire, built with daring, diplomacy and iron, stretches over churning seas and vast ambition. The chapter closes with the king casting his gaze over the waves, aware that glory and loss are twin companions. And so the legend endures, written not only in gold and lore, but in the restless hearts of those the tides will someday carry anew. Chapter 6. Storms within Rebellion and Rivalry. As the empire stretches across the North Sea, danger stirs not from distant shores, but within Cnut's own holdings. Whispers of rebellion rustle like a chill wind through stone longhalls and cloistered abbeys. Once loyal earls gather in shadow, their ambitions ignited by opportunity and envy. Cnut senses the very ground trembling beneath his feet, threatened by traitorous hearts closer than any foreign foe. The thunder of unrest grows, echoing in great halls where once loyalty was sung. Earls plot by candlelight, forging alliances that threaten to splinter the empire's unity. Princes and pretenders, some of Cnut's own kin, seize upon unrest to pursue ancient grudges or claim forgotten rights. The king's anxieties deepen as secret messengers ride at night, bearing seditious words through storm and darkness. Rebellion is not just an army on the market, is suspicion spreading like wildfire, consuming trust among Cnut's court and commanders. Loyal thanes find themselves surrounded by doubters, never sure where their next threat may come from. Cnut, ever watchful, must summon more than martial strength. He must possess the wisdom to outmaneuver schemes no blade can cut. Internal danger tests a king in ways no battlefield ever could. As tensions mount, the king calls his council to assemble before dawn's chill light. Ancient oaths are spoken aloud, but the faces around him betray unease old friendships weathered by ambition, new loyalties forged in secret. Cnut knows that empires are not only won by conquest, but held together through trust and cunning. He listens for the tremors of revolt, feeling the cold breath of betrayal at his back. The plot thickens as a northern earl, once a steadfast ally, refuses to answer Cnut's summons. Rumours swirl that this earl stirs unrest among his clansmen, armed and gathering in forests thick with secrets. Farther south, a young prince covets the throne, conspiring with rival noble-soul the while feigning loyalty. Cnut sends trusted envoys to investigate, but the path is dangerous and riddled with misdirection. In smoky halls, muted conversations hint at coming storm. The abbeys, too, harbour intrigue. Scribes and monks carry messages sealed in wax and secrecy. Some among the clergy sympathize with rebels, their prayers shadowed by politics. Cnut, wary of religious power, must navigate both faith and fear, ensuring the church remains a pillar of his rule rather than its undoing. Rebellion, it seems, takes root even in sacred ground. Distant bells toll as rumours of open defiance reach Cnut's seat of power. In the east, a coalition of lords prepares for open conflict, their banners raised against the crown itself. The air crackles with tension, friends and foes blend together, and the lines of loyalty blur. Cnut's messengers gallop through storm and mud, bearing orders to trusted commanders to quash unrest before it bursts into war. Cnut rides forth, not as a conqueror, but as a guardian, desperate to preserve what he has built. His army is a tapestry of faith and fear, the Vikings of his blood, the Saxons of his newfound land. He gathers his generals beneath stormy skies, forging pacts sealed with oaths and promises. In every voice he hears possibility of courage or of treachery. The campaign against internal enemies has begun. The sound of steel on steel reverberates as Cnut puts down the first sparks of rebellion. Skirmishes flare in the darkness, ambushes along forest roads, sieges at fortified manors. Cnut's authority, forged by conquest, is tested anew by cunning adversaries who fight not for foreign causes but for ambition and pride. Every battle in this civil storm shapes the fate of the realm he fought so fiercely to unite. Yet not every conflict ends with a clash of swords. Some rebellious lords are brought to heel by diplomacy. Cnut offers them terms, mercy mixed with warning. To others he extends the gift of exile rather than the edge of the blade, knowing sometimes mercy can secure loyalty where violence cannot. Each decision weighed in the silent hours after battle, each choice echoing the wisdom or the cost of kingship. Within the king's court, tension is a silent guest at every feast. Servants and nobles alike whisper behind closed doors, ever wary of spies bearing rumours to the king. Cnut, well aware of the deadly game around him, rewards those who prove true and roots out those who scheme. The throne is lonelier than ever, each day shadowed by the thought that betrayal may be served with every goblet of wine. One night, amid flickering candlelight, Cnut's most trusted adviser uncovers a conspiracy reaching higher than suspected. A plot to unseat the king has twisted even the king's own household against him. The discovery shakes Cnut's spirit, but steels his resolve. A ruler's burden, he knows, is the constant facing of darkness in loyal faces and choosing whom to trust or condemn. Through these storms, the lessons of leadership take shape. Cnut sees that unity demands more than banners, and battles it requires listening to the fears and hopes of earls and peasants alike. He summons councils to hear grievances, offering justice where once only violence would reign. These acts of mercy, difficult though they are, plant seeds of future peace. The king becomes both judge and healer, stitching his realm together anew. Yet amid reconciliation, Cnut does not forget the lessons of the battlefield. He stations loyal troops at strategic points throughout his territories, ever on guard for hidden uprisings. Trust, he learns, must be balanced with vigilant strength. With every dawn, as mists rise over castle battlements, Cnut strengthens his watch, knowing that peace, once shattered, must be guarded fiercely lest the cracks return. In the abbeys, monks write chronicles of this turbulent time. They record tales of rebellion, bravery, and betrayal, not just the victories of the crown, but the struggles of those who defied and defended it. Legends take root in ink and parchment, ensuring that even the stormiest season will not fade into darkness, but live on as a lesson for future kings. Cnut's defiance against internal chaos becomes a story of balance and fate. Soon, with the major uprisings quelled, Cnut turns his gaze to the aftermath. Pardons are granted to the wise and loyal, while a few traitors pay the ultimate price. Others flee, becoming shadows at the edges of the empire. Cnut's hold tightens on the realm's reins, but he is marked by the trials endured. The king's reputation grows stern but wise, able to bear the storms within as well as those without. Amid quieted halls, Cnut reflects upon destiny and trust. Ruling a kingdom means ruling over hearts and grudges as much as lands and armies. The fate of empires lies not only in conquest, but in mending wounds left by rivalry and pride. He resolves to become the unifying root at the empires, send here a force strong enough to withstand the next storm, be it born of men or of fate. The memory of rebellion lingers like a scar. For those who once stood in defiance, some find paths back to favour, others remain estranged. Bonds are reforged or broken, and the lessons of ambition burn bright in the minds of all who witnessed Cnut's ordeal. The land slowly returns to peace, its unity won not only by blade but by belief in a ruler who weathered tempests both outside and within. Even as the storm passes, Cnut never ceases his quiet vigilance. He rewards those who showed loyalty, forging a network of trust more valuable than gold. At his side stand chieftains and councillors who prove themselves in the crucible of rivalry. Together, they pledge to safeguard the realm, knowing that only constant effort and unity can prevent the return of darkness. the seeds of a stronger reign are sown. Yet Cnut finds himself changed by the ordeal. The weight of betrayal does not fade quickly. Instead, it becomes part of him, shaping a king both more cautious and more resolute. His legend grows, not merely as a conqueror, but as a ruler who could withstand both armies and conspiracies. The tale of these storms will echo through generations, inspiring awe at resilience and warning of the cost of divided rule. In time, tales of these internal storms become cautionary whispers in firelit halls. Younger rulers and wise elders alike study the chronicles, searching for wisdom amid accounts of revolt and reconciliation. Cnut's example of balancing firmness with mercy and vigilance with hope sets a new standard for kingship. Storms within, once nearly his undoing, become the forge in which a legacy is tempered, strong enough for ages to come. Cnut's council now gathers beneath banners that once fluttered in rebellion, each member sobered by what has passed. No longer mere subjects, they are partners in the fragile project of empire. Their discussions shape the laws and customs of a unified realm, blending Viking valor with Anglo-Saxon tradition. The king's rule is more secure, his people bound, for now, by common cause as well as common king. Even the bards who roam the North Sea lands sing of more than battle. Their songs weave together deeds of courage and caution, how a king who faced danger from those closest to him stood resolute. In fireside tales and hushed conversations, listeners remember that true greatness lies in facing not just the blades of foes, but the wounds of betrayal and rivalry. Through story, the lessons of these storms endure. As the last echoes of rebellion fade, Cnut surveys his realm from the high towers of his stronghold. The empire stands, scarred but united, its people forging ahead under a sovereign both battle-tested and wise. His reign is now defined by storms weathered as much as by land's Wona king who turned chaos to unity. And as dawn breaks, the legend of Cnut the Great shines all the brighter, carrying hope through every shadow that remains. Chapter 7. The King's Wisdom, Rule and Religion. Cnut's ambitions had expanded beyond battlefields, echoing through sacred halls and royal chambers. No longer content with conquest alone, he turned his mind and spirit toward shaping a legacy worthy of legend. The warrior who had claimed crowns now sought harmony between pagan roots and Christian faith, uniting peoples not only beneath his sword, but under a single guiding light. The king's court became a gathering place for scholars and priests. Cnut, ever thoughtful, invited wise men from distant lands, monks versed in sacred scriptures and laws. Together they pored over ancient codes and holy texts, striving to weave order and justice into the fabric of his realm. The air hummed with debates on duty and piety as the king listened, learning the art of governance through gentle wisdom. Cnut reformed the laws of England, melding the customs of Danes and Anglo-Saxons. He sought to ensure justice for all loyal subjects, regardless of heritage. Old Viking edicts blended with the Christian sense of mercy, forging statutes that protected both the powerful and the humble. Cnut's rule became famous for fairness, remembered long after tumults had faded. The king's commands reflected deep respect for law and the dignity of every soul. As a Christian king ruling lands of both cross and hammer, Cnut recognized the strength of unity. He funded churches and repaired ancient abbeys, offering treasure from his conquests to honor saints and martyrs. The scent of incense mingled with the memory of salt and blood. By honoring both his ancestors and the faith embraced by his new people, Cnut built bridges between north and south, legend and ritual, sword and prayer. Stories tell of Cnut's relationship with the church. He did not rule with pious distance, but involved himself in holy affairs. The king often visited shrines, gave alms to the poor, and sought the wisdom of bishops. His generosity won him allies among priests and commoners alike. In every measure charity, learning, faith, Cnut's reign promised renewal, and the hope that even a Viking heart could be touched by grace. Some doubted Cnut's piety, whispering that a conqueror's soul could never be truly Christian. Yet the king's actions gave credence to his intentions. He journeyed to Rome as a pilgrim, seeking blessings from the Pope. Among the Eternal City's ruins, Cnut humbled himself, praying for his people and his kingdom's peace. This act of devotion echoed across Christendom, and whispers of suspicion grew silent in the face of his earnest faith. Cnut's letters from Rome, preserved in ancient chronicles, show a king both humble and canny. He wrote of gifts to churches, pleas for justice, and gratitude for safe passage. In these words the king revealed his desire to be not just a ruler of lands, but a shepherd of souls. By forging ties with the spiritual guardians of Europe, Cnut strengthened his authority, linking his crown to the Church's enduring power. In the flickering candlelight of royal halls, Cnut listened to legends of old. Sagamen recited tales of Norse gods and Viking heroes, blending them with gospel parables. The king saw wisdom in these stories, believing that tradition and transformation could walk hand in hand. By honouring both Thor and Christ, he united warriors and clerics in shared reverence, creating an empire where old wounds might mend, and new stories might take root. Cnut's vision for justice extended even to his enemies. He granted clemency to former rivals, offering them positions at court if they would accept his rule and faith. This act of mercy confounded those who expected only vengeance from a conqueror. Guided by both law and gospel, Cnut transformed adversaries into allies, demonstrating that wisdom and forgiveness could bring as much peace as sword and shield ever had. At court, the king's council assembled a tapestry of voices from every corner of his domain. English things debated with Danish jarls, priests quoted scripture while Viking elders spoke of the ancient ways. Cnut listened patiently, knowing that ruling such a vast, diverse realm demanded balance. By seeking counsel from every tradition, he showed that true kingship dwelt not in solitude, but in the gathering of many minds and beliefs. The mingling of North and South was felt not just in law, but in daily life. Monks taught writing to Viking children, while Norse artisans carved dragon heads beside church doors. Feasts in the great halls became a fusion of Christian blessings and old songs. Under Cnut's wise rule, differences became strengths, and the empire grew rich in culture and spirit. Unity, the king believed, was worth more than conquest alone. Cnut's reforms reached towns and villages where new laws shielded the innocent from abuse and greed. Market rights were upheld and tolls made fair. Pilgrims and merchants found greater safety on the roads, for the king's edicts protected all who travelled in his domain. Under Cnut's hand, prosperity flourished, and the people whispered that their welfare mattered to the crown, a rare gift, born from wisdom and faith. Yet Cnut never forgot the power of pageantry. Grand processions marked holy days, and the king himself joined in the ritual, cloaked not as a warlord, but as a faithful servant. These public acts reinforced his identity as a Christian ruler. With every prayer and hymn he reminded the crowd that their king sought not glory for himself, but the blessing of heaven upon all who called his empire home. The age-old legends of the North did not vanish beneath the cross, but found room beside it. Cnut encouraged the preservation of storied sagas, believing that the memory of old heroes could inspire as much as scripture. These tales enriched the soul of his court, where skalds and clergy shared the same firelight. So, the king's wisdom accepted both inheritance and innovation, binding past valour with newfound faith. Cnut was wise in the art of alliances. He married Emma of Normandy, linking his line to the west. This union, supported by church and nobility, symbolized the joining of worlds once at war. Through Emma's counsel, Cnut found new insight into the ways of Christian courts. Together, they patronized monasteries and learning, ensuring that the legacy they built would endure beyond the fickle winds of fate. Beneath every thoughtful reform, Cnut's personal faith grew deeper. Chronicles speak of his quiet prayers and longing for absolution. Though still feared by enemies, he changed the rhythm of his days, seeking not just praise of warriors, but the peace found in chapel and cloister. In times of doubt, Cnut found solace in sacred songs, a warrior king who knelt before the altar as humbly as any peasant in the land. The king's generosity extended to the poor and weary, gifts of food at Christmas, blankets for the shivering in winter, and grants to monasteries serving the forgotten. His acts of compassion built bridges where swords once ruled. Cnut knew that kingship was a sacred trust, and every kindness given was proof of his devotion. In this way the king's legend began to shift from terror to mercy, and from conquest to care. In the halls that once echoed with war chants, now resounded the calm words of lawmakers and scribes. Cnut established councils to keep peace and prevent disputes from growing into feuds, From these assemblies came innovations that shaped England for ages. The king's wisdom lay in channeling Viking energy into governance, directing strength not just toward conquest, but into the building of fair and stable order. Tales of Cnut's humility spread far, even reaching beyond his borders. The famous story of the king commanding the tide was born in this era. As legend goes, Cnut placed his throne on the shore and demanded the sea retreat. When the waves ignored his command, he showed his courtiers that not even royal power could curb nature, only God was supreme. It was a lesson in humility that defined Cnut's later years. This lesson of the tide became a parable for all who served the king. Cnut wore his crown less often, favouring instead the sign of the cross. He wished to be remembered not only as a conqueror, but as a ruler who understood the limits of mortal pride. His reign offered proof that wisdom meant knowing when to yield, and that the greatest kings bowed before higher laws and the mysteries of the divine. At the twilight of his reign, Cnut gazed upon lands united not solely by force, but by law, custom, and faith. He had forged more than an empire, he had knit together the dreams of Norsemen and the prayers of Christians. This delicate balance stood as Cnut's true triumph, winning the loyalty of both warriors and monks. In the glow of candlelit chapels, the king's prayer echoed, "Grant peace to all who dwell beneath my crown." With his legacy secured, Cnut's final years were marked by reflection. Surrounded by wise men, the aged king pondered life's mysteries: strength, justice, faith, and the meaning of kingship. He thanked God for his victories and sought grace for his failings. In the end, Cnut the Great became a legend, not just of battle, but of wisdom, an emperor remembered for his heart as much as his sword. Thus the saga of Cnut closed with a new dawn. Legends remembered the rivers he crossed and the oaths he kept, the shrines he built and the storms he defied. His people inherited a land where ancient gods and Christian saints dwelled side by side. The king's wisdom had reshaped kingdoms, binding them with words as carefully as with swords. In faith and fairness, Cnut's true greatness shone brightest of all. As whispers of a wise king spread across Europe, Cnut's memory endured. His reign became a model for future rulers, proof that wisdom, mercy, and faith could tame even the fiercest legacy of conquest. In the halls of legend, flames flicker and storytellers recall Cnut's rule, a time when discipline and devotion, courage and kindness created an empire as enduring as the northern winds and as hopeful as a prayer at sunrise, Chapter 8. Legends forged, the tale of the tide. Along wind-swept coasts where the salt air drifts, a legend is born known that clings to the memory of kings and the whispers of the sea. Cnut the Great, conqueror and emperor, faces not armies or rebellious lords, but the relentless tides that mark the edge of his domains. Here, myth and reality entwine, shaping what it means to rule and what cannot be ruled. On the shore, courtiers and subjects gathered, drawn by a spectacle whispered through generations. Cnut, robed in royal finery, set his throne at the water's edge. The waves lapped hungrily at the sand, the tide gaining strength with every passing moment. Those who watched waited, breath held tight as their king raised a hand not with violence, but with the calm authority of one who commands nations to test the limits of mortal power over nature. This act was no boastful display. It was a lesson, wrapped in the trappings of legend. As the story unfurls, Cnut speaks with solemnity, ordering the advancing tide to halt, to respect the will of its king. Yet the Ciantamede and Ancianthides no mortal decree. Water surges forward, soaking the royal garments, leaving onlookers in awestruck silence. In that moment, Cnut's message is clear: even emperors must bow to the forces beyond their reach. Word of the king's humility spreads, taken up by storytellers who shape it into a parable etched in time. Across centuries this tale grows, told in smoky halls and in ink-stained chronicles alike. Some say Cnut's act was one of pride, others say wisdom's refusal to claim what no man can command. But whether as warning or honour, the tale endures, casting a spectral glow over his memory and over all who wield power. Why do legends like the tide command persist when the facts fade into shadow? Humanity finds meaning in stories, shaping truth into lessons for the living. For the powerful, myths wield their own might, fortifying legacies or humbling them in the eyes of future generations. Cnut's tale, born of humility, becomes both shield and test, reflecting how a king's actions ripple outward far beyond his lifetime, shaping a dynasty's place in the world. From royal chronicles to church sermons, the legend of Cnut by the tide takes on a life of its own. In these retellings, Cnut is no longer simply a king, but a figure, almost mythicus humility recast as a beacon for rulers and subjects alike. Monks and poets wield words as powerfully as kings wield swords, turning fleeting moments into lasting myth. So the boundary between king and legend blurs a story reclaiming truth from forgotten days. In the candlelit halls of monasteries, scribes carefully copy the tale onto parchment, their quills scratching out Cnut's defiant stand against the sea. With each retelling, the story is shaped by the hands that write it, adapting to the hopes or warnings of the age. Some see a pious king, others a ruler rebuking arrogance. Yet all agree the tale echoes, a testament to humility and the mysteries of fate that even the greatest rulers must face, Historical truth and legend cross currents, washing over the legacy of Cnut. Was it truly at the water's edge that he proved his wisdom, or did the tale grow in the retelling, shaped by the needs of church and crown? Historians debate as centuries pass. For every dry fact, 100 stories bloom, seeking to explain the purpose behind the king's command and why it still washes up on the sands of memory, undiminished by time. The legend serves as a paradox. Cnut's greatest victory is found in humility, an admission that even a king's power is circumscribed by the laws of earth and sea. This lesson, powerful yet gentle, holds a mirror to all who rule, reminding them their strength is matched by limits set by nature and fate. In embracing what he could not control, Cnut grants us a story more enduring than any conquest or kingly edict. As night falls and fires crackle beside weather-beaten shores, listeners gather close to hear the king's tale anew. Through the centuries, the story is retold not just for kings, but for all people, the mighty and the humble alike. The sea, indifferent and eternal, offers a lesson unchanged by time. The voice of Cnut rises above the tide, reminding all who listen that wisdom lies in knowing where power ends. Many sought to use the legend for their own gain. Ambitious rulers invoked Cnut's name, hoping his humility would anoint their ambitions with virtue. Yet each time, the story resists easy usages, as much a warning as it is a crown's adornment. That is the power of myth. It slips from grasp, refusing to serve simply as propaganda. It lives, restless as the tides that first shaped it, forever testing the boundaries of truth and legend. Artists, too, gave life to the story, painting Cnut upon the shingle, framed by the rolling waves, his royal cloak drenched, but his dignity intact. Each image and interpretation adds new colours to the legend's canvas. Stained glass glimmers with blues and golds, echoing the sea and the crown. In every depiction, humility is the centerpiece, king made noble not by dominion, but by acceptance that there are realms beyond his grasp. In schools and sermons, the moral of Cnut's tide endures across ages, transcending the man to become a lesson hung on classroom walls, whispered by teachers, echoed by priests. Children ask why a king would stand against the sea, and the answer reveals as much about those who tell the tale as the tale itself. We shape stories as much as they shape us, weaving beliefs and warnings into the tapestry. Cnut's humility becomes the compass for learning and leadership. In Cnut's own lifetime, did subjects speak in awe or skepticism of the king's beachside command? Perhaps some saw only a ritual, others a private test of faith. The line between theatre and truth is ever-shifting history's canvas coloured by the hopes and doubts of its audience. What matters is that the moment was remembered at all, rising like a tide in stories passed hand to hand, memory to memory, undiminished by storms or silence. The legend's endurance reveals how deeply humans hunger for stories that balance greatness with humility. Kings and conquerors come and go, but a tale that cautions against pride finds root in every era. Cnut's confrontation with the tide becomes a touchstone used whenever rulers risk forgetting the realms they cannot hope to master. In each retelling, the legend reshapes the listener's view, reminding them that wisdom is as enduring as the restless sea. Just as waves shape the shore over lifetimes, stories shape the memory of the mighty, moulding giants into humans, then into myths. Cnut's image rests half in shadow, half awash with the gold light of legend. For all his victories in battle, it is this humble encounter that outlives them all, proof that a king's might is fleeting, but the wisdom carried on the tide is indelible. Thus the legend remains, a quiet force in the tides of history. Centuries after Cnut, writers and rulers alike reflect upon the meaning of his confrontation with the sea. Some see it as a moment of piety, a ruler acknowledging the supremacy of heaven. Others interpret it as a subtle rebuke to sycophants and flatterers, reminding all that true greatness bows to the truth, not the whims of power. In every age the legend evolves anew, shaped by the needs and fears of those who tell it next. The power of Cnut's story endures because it offers a glimpse into the heart of leadership, where pride gives way to perspective, and authority is humbled before forces greater than itself. No matter how the world changes, the lesson at its core remains relevant. Kings, presidents, and ordinary people alike look to the tale, seeking comfort and counsel in its enduring message. As long as tides rise and fall, so too will the legend of Cnut's humility. In more recent centuries, the story of Cnut's tide becomes a parable for politicians, philosophers, and artists alike. Some use it to mock the arrogance of leaders who think themselves all-powerful. Others cherish it as a celebration of wisdom and restraint. The legend is reinterpreted over and over, its meaning shifting like sand beneath the waves, proof that the stories we tell change to meet the challenges of new generations. To be remembered as more than conqueror, Cnut's legend had to be embraced by the people who lived long after his empire faded. Through story he is made immortal not by swords or crowns, but by humility made heroic. We all inherit such legends, passing them forward, reshaping them for each new dawn. The king who faced the tide becomes a part of every tale that whispers of wisdom, cautioning those who reach for what no mortal can ever hold. The true power of legend is not its accuracy, but its ability to inspire reflection. As the tale of Cnut and the tide travels from generation to generation, its lessons deepen. In the telling and retelling, listeners young and old measure their own ambitions against the unyielding sea. History promises only that the story will return with each tide, a reminder written in waves that greatness is found not just in wielding power, but in recognizing its bounds. In the quiet moments after the legend is told, the surf continues its eternal rhythm, as if echoing the king's silent understanding. Across Europe, from wind-lashed beaches to hushed courts, Cnut's humility becomes a touchstone, a star by which generations steer. The story is never only about him. It is about every ruler, every person who learns the hard truth that some things bow to no crown, yet wisdom is found in the bowing itself. And so, the tale of the tide endures alive in the stories spoken by firelight, written in the chronicles of ages past, and reflected in the hopes of every new ruler. As waves continue to trace the world's edges, the legend of Cnut bids us remember that even kings are shaped by forces beyond their control. Through humility, Cnut stands as both a legend and a lesson, his story a light cast across the restless waters of history. In the end, perhaps the meaning of Cnut's story lies not in the attempt to command the sea, but in his willingness to show all the limits of power. We remember him not for endless conquest, but for a single gesture, part truth, part parable, eternally retold. Like the ocean itself, the legend ebbs and flows, enduring in every telling. The tale invites us to ponder the nature of greatness, long after the last wave slides back into the dark. Chapter 9. The Waning of the Empire. Years have glided by since Cnut stood at the height of his power. Once the North Sea's restless waves carried tidings of conquest and unity. Now they stir with whispers of discord. The empire Cnut wove, stretching from windswept England to distant Denmark, begins to fray at the edges. Old alliances grow brittle, and the loyal bonds of vassals strain under the weight of change. With each passing season, shadows lengthen over Cnut's vast dominion. The lords who once knelt in fealty sense opportunity amid the gathering clouds. Kingdoms nearby eye weakened borders, finding hope in the possible unravelling of the king's control. The great unity that marked Cnut's early reign now encounters rumblings of ambition, betrayal, and unrest echoing along the wind-blown shores. The empire's foundation, so strong before, shows deepening cracks. In the halls of Cnut's court, Uneasy silence falls where feasts once resounded with laughter and song. Trusted advisers speak in hushed tones, wary of spies and shifting loyalties. News of uprisings filters in from distant provinces, each new letter bringing tidings of lost towns or rebellious earls. Even steadfast allies question their place in a world less certain than before, their eyes searching for signs of the old king's strength. Cnut himself, once so vigorous and commanding, feels the pull of age and sorrow. The memories of triumph linger, mingling with shadows of regret as he surveys a crumbling realm. He ponders the fates of past kings, and wonders if his own legacy will survive the tempests gathering across the sea. As his body weakens, Cnut's mind relentlessly searches for ways to hold his empire together a little while longer. Outside the great halls, the people sense change in the salty air. Traders whisper of vanished patrols and new bandit lords stalking old roads. Fishers and farmers keep wary eyes on both the elements and the distant power struggles, knowing how quickly kingly misfortune can trickle down as famine or war. Uncertainty replaces the certainty that once settled over the lands like a warm, reassuring blanket. Across the North Sea, rival rulers stir. In Norway, ambitious warlords plot to reclaim lost independence as Danish strength falters. In Sweden, the ever-watchful eye of other kings considers the gold and glory of Cnut's empire, weighing the chances for incursion. The currents themselves seem to carry news of weakness to all neighbouring shores, emboldening those who once trembled before a united North Sea power. Within England, echoes of old enmities awaken. Anglo-Saxon nobles, who had long reconciled with Cnut's rule, debate among themselves whether the time has come to restore the ways of their ancestors. Viking settlers, once trusted allies, are caught between loyalty and self-preservation. By night, fires flicker as secret meetings hatch plans to seize advantage if the sceptre slips from Cnut's grasp. Cnut's reign, for all its strength, balances on the edge of a sword. Each decision carries greater consequence. Each misstep risks undoing years of patient rule. The king works tirelessly, sending emissaries with gifts and warnings, seeking to patch the fragile web that binds his lords together. Even as his health declines, his will remains formidable, but cracks continue appearing in the mighty structure he built. Old friends who braved battles at Cnut's side start to fall away or pass into memory. The loss of these stalwart companions weighs heavily, deepening Cnut's solitude amid the grandeur of his court. He recalls banquets lit by torchlight, songs of victory, and the loyal voices now silent forever. Their absence amplifies the king's awareness of his own mortality and the shifting tides lapping at his empire's shores. Even within his own family, unity begins to erode. Sons, eager for power, eye the throne and question their father's choices. Queen Emma, once the queen of both Cnut and his predecessor, offers counsel coloured by her own ambitions and uncertainties. The bonds of kinship strain under the weight of succession struggles, echoing the broader fractures rippling through the realm. Everywhere Cnut looks, he sees the ghosts of glories past. Trophies and keepsakes from distant campaigns crowd his chambers, reminders of battles won and kingdoms tamed. Yet each artifact becomes a bittersweet memento, a testament to the fleeting nature of authority. Cnut feels how honour and conquest, once so tangible, now drift like smoke, difficult to grasp or hold aloft amid mounting challenges. The king's agents scurry across the empire's breadth, delivering decrees and gathering news, but even the swiftest messengers cannot stem the rising tide of discontent. The land, once knitted tightly by Cnut's vision, is now riven by local rivalries and old feuds renewed. In distant shires, the king's word loses its former weight as local barons seize power, quietly challenging the old order. As the empire's unity wanes, myths and rumours grow in the silence. Tales spread of a king who once commanded the very tides, now struggling against currents he cannot control. Such stories blend awe with pity, for even greatness bends before the unceasing march of time. In market squares and smoky taverns, bards sing of Cnut's power, and quietly ponder how legends fade as kingdoms falter. Night after night, Cnut finds himself haunted by dreams. He recalls the icy spray of the sea, the clangour of sword against shield, and the voices of warriors calling his name. Yet these memories are tinged with loss, faces of fallen friends flicker by, laughter replaced by the hush of empty halls. The once mighty king contemplates what, if anything, endures when victory itself slips away. In a moment of rare candour, Cnut gathers his closest companions. Around a low-burning fire, he speaks not as a king, but as a weary man. He recalls the burdens of power, the sacrifices made for peace, and the painful knowledge that unity can be the most fragile of treasures. This quiet confession lingers, remembered long after as the twilight of Cnut's reign settles upon his world. The North Sea, once a pathway to conquest, now appears as a churning, restless frontier. Cnut stands upon the shore, gazing into the storm-laden distance. Each wave whispers of rivals approaching, of lands that once bowed to his rule, now restless and defiant. In the salt spray and roaring winds, he senses the inevitability of change, recognizing that no power is eternal, not even that forged by a Viking king. Inside his chambers, courtiers maneuver and scheme, each hoping to survive or rise in the uncertain times ahead. Some pledge loyalty with empty words, while others quietly gather allies for the coming struggles. The torchlight flickers on anxious faces as everyone senses the dawn of a new agony where alliances shift swiftly and only the most cunning may seize what remains of the empire's riches. Cnut's eyes, once fierce and bright, now carry the weight of knowledge earned through triumph and loss. He revisits old counsel, hoping to rescue what fragments of peace and unity remain. When prayers are whispered in the great churches he endowed, both subjects and priests ask for stability, yet amidst their pleas there's an unspoken fear that the era of Cnut the Great nears its close. As word of the king's failing health spreads, the empire bristles with anticipation. Some subjects mourn at the prospect of losing a firm hand, others see opportunity in the coming chaos. Ears strain for rumours from the court, as lords and commoners alike prepare for whatever the uncertain future may hold. The slow, steady drumbeat of Cnut's decline resounds through every corner of his scattered kingdoms. The final days of Cnut's reign bear the hush of a gathering storm. At council, voices rise in argument, each lord defending his claim, his inheritance, his vision for the future. The king listens, weighed down by the knowledge that his words carry less command than before. He recognizes that transition is unavoidable, and the next age may bear little resemblance to the order he struggled to create. There are moments when Cnut, despite his burdens, recalls the wonder of his journey. He remembers the Viking longships slicing roiling seas, the thrill of conquest, and the heady days when a single will united kingdoms under one banner. Now he seeks to pass what wisdom he can to those who will follow, hoping their grasp is sure even as his own slips in the face of history's relentless current. As the king's strength wanes, the realm waits breathless at the crossroads. Would a new leader restore the lost unity, or would rival claims splinter the empire for good? For Cnut there remains a fragile hope that somewhere among the scattered ruins of ambition and strife, the spirit of peace and greatness might take root once again. So passes the last act of a Viking who once ruled an empire. Outside, as autumn turns to winter, the land grows silent in anticipation. The once boisterous harbours, now subdued, await word from the crown. Loyal subjects walk between flickering lanterns, whispering prayers for stability, or murmuring predictions of upheaval. The slow unravelling of Cnut's empire settles over the North Sea like a cold mist, both an ending and a beginning for all who dwell beneath its shadow. Cnut's final days blend the majesty of lost glory with the humble acceptance of what must be. As torches gutter out and bells toll softly, the memory of a great king flickers in the hearts of his people. Though the empire he forged falters, his story endures echoing down the halls of time as both a warning and a wonder. Thus fades Cnut the Great, Viking, Emperor, Legend, and Man. Chapter 10. Echoes across the ages. As the reign of Cnut drew to its close, the mighty empire he built began to slip through his grasp. Like the ebb of a powerful tide, his presence faded, and the lands he once united drifted apart. Yet Cnut's legacy did not vanish with his passing. Instead, it echoed through the halls of history, resonating long after the Viking sails vanished from stormlit horizons. In the years that followed Cnut's death, his North Sea empire fragmented. Brothers and sons vied for control, and old rivalries reignited. England, Denmark and Norway, once bound by a single crown, splintered into their own destinies. But amid the chaos and the struggle for power, the legend of Cnut refused to be silenced. Whispered in mead halls and carved on runestones, his story endured. Though divided by the tides of fate, the kingdoms Cnut ruled could not forget the unlikely king who once united them. Chroniclers wrote of a ruler who conquered not by cruelty alone, but by wisdom and compromise. His subjects remembered a time when Viking and Anglo-Saxon traditions mingled by royal command, a fleeting golden age immortalized in song and saga, its memory too powerful for time to wash away. As centuries passed, the tale of Cnut was reshaped, embroidered with myth and wonder. Stories grew of a king so mighty he commanded the very ocean itself, an immortal challenge rendered at the shore as Cnut called upon the restless tides, proving the limits of mortal power. Whether true or born of legend, such stories became woven into the tapestry of his memory, inspiring awe in generations yet to come. Writers and poets seized upon the image of Cnut at the water's edge, a moment both proud and humble. The lesson of the tide became more than a legend. It grew into a reflection on the nature of kingship, reminding those who would rule that even monarchs answer to forces beyond their command. Cnut's humility and wisdom became symbols, far outlasting even his greatest earthly victories. Historians later debated the real man behind the myth. Was Cnut the ruthless conqueror, the shrewd diplomat, or the pious Christian king who walked the line between worlds? Each generation found their own meaning in his life and reign. To some he was a hero, to others a cautionary figure. The echoes of his choices stirred fresh questions in the minds of those who pondered power and legacy. In classrooms and libraries, Cnut's saga became a lesson in unity and division. His empire's rise and fall showed the fleeting nature of power, how even the greatest conquests can crumble without a strong foundation. Yet his ability to blend cultures and rule with fairness left a template for future kings who dreamed of uniting fractured lands under a single banner. Across the centuries, the shadow of the Viking king lingered on English and Danish soil. Cathedrals he endowed stood as silent witnesses, coins bore his name long after his passing. Every ship that braved the North Sea seemed to sail in the wake of Cnut's ambition, and every coronation invoked memories of a ruler who wore crowns of 3 kingdoms, holding the line between chaos and order. Many rulers tried to reclaim Cnut's lost glory, but none could match his unique blend of strength and wisdom. His story haunted the dreams of kings and conquerors alike, a reminder that peace is as hard won as war. Poems recounted the golden days when a Viking ruled with justice, his legend a beacon shining through fog of memory, guiding leaders who dared to challenge destiny. The tale of Cnut took on a life of its own. It became a parable recited at firesides, a story children learned beside tales of dragons and gods. His legacy persisted not because of the size of his empire, but because of the human truths it revealed. The tides Cnut could not command came to symbolize the reality that all rulers must face their limits, however mighty they may seem. In the quiet moments between wars and conquests, the memory of Cnut offered hope. Even after his empire fell, his vision of a united people endured. It was a dream carried in speeches, in prayers, and in the longing for lost unity. Generations look back to his reign when imagining what might be possible if wisdom and strength could balance in the heart of a single leader. In far-off lands where Cnut's footprints never reached, his legend stirred the imaginations of storytellers. The north wind carried tales of the king who mastered sea and land, whose legacy inspired wonder across medieval Europe. Myths grew larger as distance and time blurred history into legend, and the once mortal Viking was transformed into a symbol of courage and kingly grace. Chroniclers preserved Cnut's deeds in ink and parchment, their accounts a mixture of fact, fidelity, and folklore. From the bustling markets of London to the wild fjords of Norway, his name became shorthand for ambition and forgiveness. Every storyteller, in every generation, found new meaning in his triumphs and trials, ensuring his story would never vanish from the chronicles of men. In his rise and his fall, Cnut's story illuminated one timeless truth: empires crumble, but ideas endure. The king who defied the tide left behind more than borders or treasures. He gave the world a legend, It lived and breathed through those who retold it, lingering in the dreams of those who aspired to shape the course of history as he once did across the stormy age of Vikings. In every turbulent century that followed, people looked to the stories of Cnut for guidance. His ability to navigate treacherous waters, both literal and political, became a lesson in adaptability. No matter the era, no matter the odds, his example whispered that even in the fiercest storms, a wise ruler could chart a course towards peace, and that a fleeting moment of unity could echo for ages. The dramatic legend of Cnut's wave command echoed in art and song, a testament to the power of humility and perspective. Kings came and went, but the tale of the king who acknowledged his limits endured, retold wherever people sought the wisdom to rule themselves or each other. Each retelling added something new, shaping the myth so it would not fade, but instead grow ever brighter with the passing years. From the darkest winters to the brightest summer feasts, people gathered to hear how Cnut had ruled justly, walking the narrow path between strength and mercy. His example reassured weary listeners that greatness was possible, even fleetingly. The sound of his name, passed from parent to child, was a promise that the spirit of the Viking king would not vanish but ring out, resounding across time. Through shifting alliances and changing ages, the story of Cnut remained steady. He became a mirror in which every generation saw something different, a conqueror, a wise statesman, or a reminder that no earthly power is absolute. Each era shaped and reshaped his legend, but always, at its heart, waited the memory of a king who challenged the tide and dared the impossible. In the ruins of old fortresses and the chants of distant abbeys, the whisper of Cnut's reign persisted. Coins glimmered with his likeness for generations, treasures hidden away as reminders of a moment when the world was linked by faith and daring. Even after centuries rolled by, those silent reminders kept the story alive, a golden thread spun through the dark tapestry of medieval Europe. Long after kingdoms rose and fell, the myth of Cnut the Great endured against the tides of time. His lesson, that power yields to nature and that mortal glory is fleeting, resonated beyond the halls of kings. In each retelling, listeners found comfort in the humility and insight of the Viking king who could not command the sea, and from his story drew wisdom as enduring as stone. So it is, in the quietest corners of old cathedrals, or by the banks of rivers he once crossed, the legend of Cnut still speaks. In the low murmur of history shared at dusk, his footsteps echo in the songs and stories of people who remember that empires are built on both courage and humility. The legacy of Cnut endures, a prince of the north immortalized not in conquest, but in story. As night falls on the saga of Cnut, his spirit lingers, woven inseparably into the fabric of northern lore. The legend keeps the memory of lost days alive, and each retelling rekindles wonder for a world shaped by sea and sword. His story remains a guiding light for those who listen, a reminder that history's greatest tales live forever, carried by voices echoing from age to age. And so, the waves that swallowed Cnut's empire could never erase his name from the chronicles of history. His story survives in stone, in song, and in the hearts of those fascinated by the wisdom and daring of a Viking king. With every new dawn, his legend calls to mind the possibility of shaping the world, and the enduring hope that even the fiercest tide cannot erase a legacy born of courage. The echoes of Cnut the Great carry through time, whispering lessons of unity, humility, and ambition. From stormy North Sea nights to the flames of a storyteller's fire, his legend invites us to imagine a world where strength and wisdom can change the course of history. Though empires fade, the tales we tell remain, and in every retelling, Cnut's spirit is awakened anew, sailing forever across the ages.